new from this. And everybody, please feel free to jump in on the chat to share thoughts, ideas, questions, and I'll see if I can, I'll try and be aware of what they are. Okay, so let's get started. So just first of all, introducing myself. My name is Lena, and I'm just going to see if I can make it work. I founded the company called Autens, where we work with school development in many different aspects. So we look at what the future of learning might be and how we can rethink, reimagine our schools, how we can reimagine education and what takes place in school, and how we can reimagine learning spaces to support that. So we work all across the board really with reimagining learning, with changing the practice hand in hand with teachers and pedagogues here and students too. And then we work on building, we help architects design schools, we work a lot with user engagement, and then we also design specific learning spaces. Across all that, we're involved in a lot of international collaboration. So one of these things that we do here is run the Global Schools Alliance with a bunch of schools across the world, very much focused on project-based learning, personalized learning, and skills for competences for the future. So really interesting schools if you want to dive into any of these. All right, I'm just gonna check. Sorry, I haven't used this web platform before, so I just want to see if I've got it right. Yes, I just want to check out your, oh, turn on my camera, somebody says. I'll see how I can do that. So, hi, hi everybody. So just checking, do you see me now or the slides? Or both? Both. All right. So I hope the slides are bigger and then my picture is just the little one. Is that so? Good. All right, let's get started. So did you see the slides before as I was explaining a little bit about what we're doing? Good. So let's move on here. All right, just a little quick poll. How many of you have been part of rebuilding or designing a new school? You can press 1. You can just type 1. How many of you have been involved in redesigning something that you already had, but include involving some construction work? So the first one, a whole new school building or school department. The next one, also construction work, but redesigning things. The third one, have you been part of designing the learning spaces? So it's more of a furniture thing within an area of a school, or maybe as simple as a classroom. That is number 4. And 5, you have not worked with learning space design before. Let me see what kind of group we have here. So a little bit of each, I can see. Great, wonderful, thank you for sharing. We've got a few more typing something up here. Perfect. So what I'm gonna go through here is to look at some of the background when we look at learning space design. What is our thinking, the philosophy behind it? And then I'm gonna go into a more specific tool for how can you work with the actual design. And then at last, we'll look at how it might look in a regular school that doesn't have any funding in particular for this. So first, some background on learning space design. First of all, learning space design might seem a little odd. It doesn't, for me, it doesn't have anything to do with the actual design of spaces. It's more of an expression of a learning culture. It's a narrative. It's something that you want to, it's a way you communicate who you are as an educational institution. It's the way you communicate what learning is. And it's also, on a more functional level, a technology for learning. So it's basically a tool for helping your students learn. And what kind of tool do you want to put in place is the important question here. And we've got a model that we always use. It's very much how we think. And if you look at the lower left side of the model with the physical learning space design, that's where we're going to end. But before we get to that point, it's so important to go back and look at what is your vision for learning at your school? What's your learning philosophy? How does learning take place? What are the values that drives you? And once you've got a really clear understanding of that, which is shared in your learning community across your board of teachers, your board of parents, your whatever important people participate in the design process, you look at the learning activities that takes place. So it's basically also not just redesigning your learning spaces. It is thinking about what kind of school do you want to be, what kind of university do you want to be, how does learning take place. So what should happen when you open the doors and look inside, what do you see going on here? And also, how do you organize learning? Who's working with whom? How many large groups, small groups? Do you collaborate across ages or year groups? So you need to get all of that. That's a foundation for creating a really efficient learning space design. All of that goes into the physical design. So when we look at the vision for learning, it's very important to think about how we are wired to learn. People learn in the most efficient way. If we can create something that's like the intersection of being joyful, meaningful, and engaging. That's the sweet spot of learning. And this will be different from person to person. It often involves something social, that we are together in this, because that'll be joyful and it'll help create that meaning. But meaningful learning also means that it might be something that makes a difference to somebody, and not just something that's useless that you do something in school, it goes in a book, it goes in a bag, and it goes nowhere. You want to create learning experiences that are meaningful to students, that really matter. Have students do work that matter. And in doing that, it's very important that they experience positive emotions, that they experience. Oh, I'm just looking at the chat. It says we lost you. Is that so? Can you hear me? I'm just checking. So, and how about you, Gerd? Good. Maybe we lost our suite here. Let's see. Anyway, I'm gonna assume, since many of you say yes, I'm gonna assume that it's still working. I got Manuel typing now. Thank you. Thanks from Portugal. Thanks, Manuel. So we might have lost Sweden here. Gerd, I'll write it. We'll do an extra session for you guys if it didn't work. We have you writing now. Let's see what you're typing. Good, you're back. Great. I'll continue. So we're talking about how we're wired for learning and how we can create those positive environments that really help us learn. So we want to create environments that actually also helps kids and young people shape friendships, build networks, and experience positive emotions, and also that they are able to handle negative emotions when they occur in a way that's not humiliating, but in a way where this environment can feel respectful for everybody. Also on the right-hand side, you notice a lot of body parts, and it's just to say that we need to get the body involved in learning, because we are not just heads on a stick. We are people, human beings, and there's so many parts of us that are involved in learning. And also we know for a fact that if we can get our hands on things and interact very physically with the world around us, we increase our capacity for learning. So these are things to take into consideration when you think about what learning should look like in your school. if we look at what it is that we need to learn, every country has a range of subjects that are like they almost look the same as they did 100 years ago, but still there's a little bit of change. But the thing that's so important today is what we call the 21st century skills. It's called many different things. You can call them anything you like, but it's did the slide shift? I'll just check. Yes. Here it's a very simple version of creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, and communication. These are, this not just me saying this, but it's from the highest level of OECD, their education office too, and all across the world. These are the new hard skills. These are so important skills for every kid and young person to learn today, and to actually be able to reimagine things, to be creative, to experiment, to collaborate, to reach out for knowledge wherever in the world it is, and be able to collaborate in creating things that are needed in the world of today. And we definitely need critical thinking as well, and being able to communicate also across cultures. So it's we are way past the time when it was about learning knowledge and being able to recite that. It's about now being able to learn things, pick up things, and also identify what it is that you need to learn, and not least apply it, create things, create new things, and put it into practice with other people. So these are very important things to think about when you design learning spaces. And I brought this little slide of global goals, just as an example of challenges that we all face, no matter where we are in the world today. All our societies face important challenges that we need to educate our young people to be able to solve, to come up with solutions and see if they can do a little bit better than our generation did. And it's also just things are moving so fast today, so that in school we need to be on our toes. We need to make learning something that's very both flexible and in interaction with the world around us, locally and globally. And it really means something to the way that we create our spaces. So let's have a look here. Many of the schools that we go to every week and throughout the year, they'll have a mission or some values or a vision of where they want to go. That's something along these lines, where they want to be a school for the future citizen, for a responsible, sustainable citizen that's innovative, creative, and can lead the future. And let's take a look at how these schools mostly look, at least in my country. They look like this. So sorry, are the slides changing? And yes, good. So schools, many places look like this, where this is where we want to educate our innovative change makers of the future. This is a typical classroom from my country. I'm based in Denmark. I don't know what it might look like in your different countries. I've been to quite a lot of countries across the world, and it's not too far off to say that this is something we see in many places. This is a bit more, well, basically what you have here, you have 25 similar work desks and work situations for 25 different kids or young people, and that's the room for creativity is really missing here. So this is where we introduce another model that we use. It's from organizational culture. It's Edgar Schein, MIT professor. And this model is used for analyzing an organizational culture. So you can walk into any business, organization, even a home, and look at the artifacts, the top layer of this model, and look at what is it that you see here. And in this case, we see 25 similar work desks. We don't see too much on the walls. We don't see anything else. We see every chair directed in the same way. And we know what they are looking at. We know it's a blackboard, a whiteboard, a smartboard. So if we go one step down in this model and look at what's beneath the artifacts, then we look at the expected behavior. What are the artifacts telling us about how to behave here? What are the norms? And here it would be to be silent and look at, like, one way, or listen to what the teacher is saying, put your hand up, all of that. We know the drill. I've got a slide here also, actually helping. Is it changing? Good. And artifacts and the norm system that it communicates would most often have made sense at some point in any organization. That's why they're there. So they are telling you something about the basic assumptions of this organization. So here, if the artifacts are to really make sense, it must be because we learn the same way, all of us, and we need to do the same thing at the same time. And basically, the teacher knows everything that you need to know, and you don't need to do anything. You don't have to take any independent initiative here. You just sort of put on the factory line, and things will work out. Now, I don't meet many teachers who have this philosophy about learning. I don't meet many schools who think this way about learning. But I do see many schools where we have spaces like this. So how can we look at what our basic assumptions really are and begin to create and design the environment around us to nudge and support people in using our spaces in a new way that will actually help deliver on our learning mission? So just a small little here. Could we in the chat maybe have everybody sharing a little bit about how their schools, what their schools look like and what you think it communicates? So in like maybe one sentence, just something you think about with your own school or college or university, something that comes to mind that you maybe want to change here. What is it communicating to your students? And is that in line with how you're thinking about learning? So let's see what people have here. So a small little exercise for everybody to take part in, just to understand how this model works of learning culture, the basic assumptions and the artifacts that actually, what the artifacts are showing about the basic assumptions. And it might not be that your basic assumptions are in line with your actual way of thinking. So let's see. So we've got some saying it's a little bit messy and needs to be more cozy and comfortable. And we've got classrooms like the one I showed. Yep, and we've got a Portuguese college here changing things. I'd love to see pictures, Manuel. Interesting. And then we have a totally virtual classroom. Really, really interesting. It's great that you're sharing, because it also gives us a perspective on like a cross section of European classrooms, also cross age. It's really interesting to see this. Thank you very much. And it's just basically when you walk into your school the next time, or even your virtual classroom, think about what's the educational model here that we are supporting through the physical or the virtual structures? And is it in line with what you want to do? Thank you, guys. I'll continue. So this model here is trying to share how we go from what we call a 20th century classroom and learning design to a much more flexible in and out of school learning scenario. So on the left-hand side, you have the teacher and a lot of students with the same needs, same time. The dialogue is mostly between teachers and some of the students or the whole class at the same time. The middle one, we have group work. And the last one, we have both the virtual, we have in and out of classrooms, we have experts coming in, we have some collaborating, some working alone, etc., and more student driven. So this happens once we maybe begin to have a more project-based curriculum, and students in different groups will need to do different things at the same time. So let's look at how we can actually design for this. And we've been doing some thinking in how can we communicate the way we work, because it's just like take what you can of this. So what is it that we think about when we design learning spaces? So I've divided it into 4 F's, because when you know 4 letters, it's easier to remember 4 letters that are the same. So and luckily I could, it really it corresponded with some words that will help you remember how to maybe go about a design if you ever get in the situation where you need to do that. So it's families, functions, feeling, and facilitation. So, and you need to have worked out your learning philosophy before you go through this process. So it's on the top left corner where you see the vision for learning. You need to work out what kind of school you are, what learning should look like in your school. And once you've done that, you can then go through this process. So let's see what's in it. First, we look at the families part. It's basically your learning communities. This is the larger picture of a school. It's looking at, do you have everything in the right place? Do you have the classrooms that might need to collaborate? Do you have them placed close to each other? Do they have breakout spaces if they need so? Where are your creative workshop areas, your science labs, everything? Like, do you need maybe to shift something around to make it more logical and work better? Or is everything in the right place? That's basically the question we have here. So I'll just, the program is, I'm trying to work it here. Good. So one thing you could look at here when we look at the families is that, do you want every classroom to be similar to each other? Or do you have several classes and classrooms collaborating across? Because then you might want to do something where they have different facilities, but you have a setting for teaching and learning in each classroom, and you can also combine all of it to a more varied learning environment. So it depends, of course, what kind of school you are, what you're doing, but you might want to think about that. And I'm going to show you an example here from Sweden. It's called Glömstaskolan. And this school, it's quite new. It opened 1 or 2 years ago, and it's designed with home areas or learning areas for a year group of 3 classes. And in each corner, you see a space where you have room for maybe 7,500 kids. And I'm gonna go deeper into it. This is a little bit bigger here. So what you can see is a setting where you don't have 3 classrooms in a row and then the hallway. You have the spaces being used in a completely different way, where you have smaller rooms that you can close off if you need to and use them as regular classrooms, but not for all 3 classes at the same time. As you have the lower classroom is not for, it's shared with the next learning area. This actually frees up space that you don't have a classroom for each class. It frees up space to have a varied selection of smaller group rooms, a little bit larger group rooms. There's an area where you can get people together on a staircase. You have lounge areas. So you have a variety of spaces. So this is one way of doing it. Here's another one from one of our schools in New Zealand. I'll just see if it changes. Does it change? Yep. And in New Zealand, the way they design schools is that they design what they call learning hubs. And it's also 75 to 100 kids in sharing the same space, which then has a huge variety of places where you can sit and work, you can focus, you can concentrate, you can collaborate in groups. And the teachers work in teams, helping smaller groups of students, teaching them, supporting them for a shorter period of time than a typical lesson. So they are more facilitators, coaches, supporters, mentors of the students, where the students are driving their own learning and are also able to move on to next steps and really draw on each other. So these are some examples of how you can think about the first bit, the families bit, like how do you want to structure your school? How do you want to organize everything? So it's basically you want to keep families together. You want to keep those most important people you collaborate with. You want to keep them close and see how you can actually combine your space and design it, like focus on it in a useful way and find out what you want out of this space, so you don't just copy one classroom after another, so you can only do the same thing in a small space instead of having you actually have the choice of a larger variety if you combine it. So let's move on to the next F. It's functions, and it's pretty simple what it is. It's basically what you want to be able to do in your learning space. So these are verbs. It's very important, like to say something. I want to be able to, or we need to be able to do this or that. So use verbs. That's a very, very good approach to that. So you want to be able to listen, present, collaborate, experiment, build, be creative, communicate. Maybe you want to Skype. So there's a lot of things you need to list them down and find out what it is that would be useful to you, so that you can get everything in and find out how many will be using the different functions. Are they used at the same time? And let's look at one thing that's always interesting. Look at what teachers and students are already sharing with us about this. I often, when I walk into a school, I'm so curious as to what the students and what they are doing when they're not told what to do. So just a few pictures, a couple of kids here who found their own little group space where they feel they can focus. They are doing some assignments and have a wonderful little space just to themselves that nobody thought of would be a group space. Or have a look at this. This is Munkegårdsskolen in Denmark. A beautiful, huge area that's built as a breakout space outside a lot of science labs. And if you notice here the choice of furniture, you can see there are high tables and there are lots of stools here. However, the young people would rather lie in one big, what do you call it? Just lie together. Sorry, all of them in one big pool of people, really, where they can be close together, where they can collaborate. And we see this with teenagers, that they would much rather lie down and work than they would want to sit up on a high stool or a hard chair, something like that. So think about soft seating and something more where they can lie down, where it's also a social experience. The next picture here, it's a reception grade, kindergarten grade. So these are 5-year-olds. And in this classroom, I stood there watching for a while and looked at what was going on. And it seemed that they really enjoyed using the floor. They really enjoyed standing up and working. So actually, if you look at it, there's like not too much floor space because it's all filled up with tables and chairs. And the only chair that's being used really is used by a teaching assistant, the one in the blue blouse and blue trousers. And then there's a kid standing up in an armchair and one by the window. The rest of them, to them, all the chairs here and the tables are just in the way. So it's again thinking about not getting 25 similar work desks and chairs for your class, because it's not what they need. And you can see it if you look at what your students are doing in your school. I'm sure that that will tell you something that'll help you. And we've co-designed schools and learning spaces with more than 2,000 teachers and also lots and lots of students. And we actually co-design in a very hands-on way where they're able to show us what is meaningful to them. So I've just picked out some main points about the function. What kind of functions are they looking for? What's important to them? So they tell us, and I've got about 10 slides of these functions. They tell us they want something that is varied, attractive, and playful, somewhere where they have choice, so that they don't have to sit in the same spot throughout the lesson, throughout the day, but can actually choose and change and mix. Because for some things, some work better than other things. So it's like being able to actually know yourself as a learner and being able to choose a good setting for you to focus or to collaborate, whatever it is that you need. This picture is from a Swedish school, Skaparskolan. I think this was a temporary building, so it doesn't look like that anymore. It's a new building now. I haven't yet been there. Another thing they tell us is that they need spaces within spaces. So it's basically trying to create these small rooms in the bigger room. So it's again back to choice. How can you create a lot of little rooms in the bigger room for collaboration or focus, so that it's varied? And again, what you see here is a varied landscape. So you have settings that are lower, settings of normal height, you have higher settings, you have places where you sit more sort of staircase-like amphi seating. This is another example where you can sit in a beanbag chair on the floor, you can sit high up, or you can sit at a table with the others discussing. Again, choice, variety, and that different landscape that actually also helps reduce noise. Another thing that's really important, that maybe one of the key points, is children really need places where they can feel private in a school. In Denmark, they're there from 8 in the morning till 3 to 5 in the afternoon, and they cannot just go to the staff room if they need a break, as we can do when we think, can we get a bit of peace and quiet? So we need to create spaces where you can sit with your best friend and study and feel more alone, or places you can go when you're not feeling too good, or just you want that bit of peace and privacy. So what we always say, whenever there's a crack in the building, we see a kid there or a whole group of kids. So as many caves, nooks, hiding spaces you can create, that's really beneficial to many kids, so that they have that choice. So the next slide is to look at the spaces you have and see how you can make all spaces learning spaces. In many schools, we see as much as up to 20% of the space being used for nothing. So that would be hallways, corridors, where you clean them and then you go to class. That's like back and forth and no real use. And during lessons, these spaces are actually pretty quiet spaces to be in. So how can you maybe transform them and make them active learning spaces? And it goes for everywhere in your school. Look at how you can incorporate learning or encourage learning or make it a social place, things of use and value to teachers and students. And summing up about functions and our huge amount of processes we've had with teachers and students in co-creating, and this is mainly it's mainly Danish students that we've worked with and teachers. So this might be different for your countries, but this is just to say what's important from what they are telling us. Over here, the green bubbles are 4 main zones or functions that need to be in place in a good way. It's presentation. Actually, all classrooms have that, but they have it like too much. So it needs to be balanced with places for collaboration, places for creative production, and also places for quiet, focused study. And alongside, you want to create and you want to create the spaces in a way where you encourage well-being and a sense of belonging for the students that are there. It's actually really, really important that you feel part of the place, you feel welcome, you feel it's your space too. You want to encourage movement and play. You want to make sure that you can exhibit student work and also exhibit other kinds of things that will inspire the students in their work. So it could be different subject things from history, from anything, science, boards, whatever thing you put on the floor to encourage and inspire, and also share what's going on in your school. So you can actually tell when you walk inside, you're immersed in an environment that really works. So these are just an example of some of the workshops that we do with teachers and students and what they share, what they want. Um, so, yep. But many teachers, when we meet them, they say, hey, that's all very good and I really want to change things, but this is what my classroom looks like. I don't have any space to do any inspiring thing here. And the thing is, it's not about the space, it's how you use the space. So this is the same size classroom, but just used in a very different way. You don't even need to have all the furniture, like the new furniture. You can also decide to use your old existing furniture in other ways, and oftentimes take some of it out to create more room on the floor. And this is an example. It's a new classroom from the northern part of Denmark. It's difficult to see on the left-hand side, it's actually amphi seating, these two staircase things in front of the whiteboard. Underneath you have a cave where the children can dive in and just like find a quiet spot to read. They can climb up in the back of the room and lie down and work on whatever assignment they have. There are different tables, also group tables that is outside the picture. So just an example of what classrooms could also look like. So summing up on the function, it's not about necessarily what you buy, it's how you use it and what you allow your students to do, and also what you take out of the space. And it's something that you also need to, you cannot, if you are more teachers using one room, you need to actually you need to have the same view, and you need to be in agreement of how do we want the space designed. So it's actually a team exercise, it's a school exercise. It's basically about your philosophy of learning here and how it flows through into the physical design. And it's difficult to do just one single teacher, and then you have the next teacher coming in and they will have a completely different view. So it's something like talk about pedagogy, learning, how you organize it, and what you want the students to be able to do. So summing up the functions, you want to design your spaces purposefully and well balanced, so they're not just aimed at the presentation situation, whether it's from teachers or students. You want them to also support other functions and also be really flexible, so you have a Swiss Army knife for your learning design. All right, guys, so let's move into feelings, the third F here. What we want to look at here is what kind of atmosphere do you want to create, and how would you like your students to feel when they are in your school or in your college. And I'm picking out a few examples here. We can see that if we can create environments where students feel cared for, it's something we do in our pedagogy, in the way we work professionally with students. It's so important that they feel somebody likes them, and are able to understand them. And we can also build it into our spaces. It's not, you still need to be able to do it as a professional, but still the spaces can support friendships, the sense of nurture and care, that they are something and that you respect them. So create spaces that actually communicate that. Also, if we put in elements of nature, we can see that it has a calming effect. It's something our brains like. We're actually wired to learn in nature, so it's actually pretty simple that it's something we all like, and it has a positive effect on us. And the funny thing is that if we cannot have maybe live plants or trees inside, or we can also go outside, but even if we put up wallpaper of a forest, we still get a lot of the same effect. So our brains, we don't mind being cheated a little bit, so a picture is good too. but nature really does something to make us feel more comfortable in a room. So I'm just sharing also another picture here. And it's not just a picture of nature or the trees, it's also using materials like the stool here, using wood and using natural materials that has a good effect on us. Another thing, when we talk about how the spaces should feel, if you co-create your space with students, it becomes theirs more. We know a sense of belonging is super important to students, how they feel in school, how they learn, for many students. And this is an example of how the students have been part with the teacher of co-creating their space for this, in fact, a particular project. But you can involve the students in so many ways, and little tweaks and things you can do in your classrooms or your bigger learning space to make them feel part of the place and that they're contributing. It's something you did together. And here, of course, as a Dane, we say don't forget the hygge. And hygge means the cozy place, the place that feels warm, welcoming, and where you kind of forget time around you. You focus and you are together with you are present in the now. So if we can, when we can see that when we manage to create those areas that have the sense of hygge, it really supports a lot of kids, and also the teachers feel better in the place or in that space and enjoy it more. So summing up on the third F, feelings, you want to just briefly, you want to have your students feel safe. You want to have them feel respected and that they belong. That's the most important thing here. The last little bit of facilitation, and maybe while I'm talking here, maybe you can share some of your ideas in the chat box, what you might be doing here. So when we look at facilitation, we're talking about what can we do with little things that can help support the learning culture we're looking for. We can call it micro tools or anything that will enable the students to personalize their learning experience more. So, and also nudge them to do different things. So this is a picture from a Danish school where, as some of you might know, movement in learning is a very important part of education in Denmark. So this is a climbing wall instead of a big staircase, where students are encouraged, of course, to move and climb. And those of you who were in Finland, the Danish team clearly illustrated what movement does to us and how we need reignite our brains every now and then through moving our bodies. This is another example where you can learn how to count and you can learn the alphabet, moving around as a physical thing, getting your whole body involved. And in the back, you can see these little nooks and spaces where children can both play or just go take a little moment to themselves. Other examples, a more expensive one and a very cheap way of doing the same thing. How can you jump a table and learn numbers that way, and learn even numbers and odd numbers, whatever it is that you want. You can find ways of doing this. It could be painting a wall green so that you can work with green screening, blue screening, whatever color you use. A very simple and cheap method of encouraging children to work with creativity and create films, pictures, funny things that can incorporate the subject learning that they need to dive into. Also, you might have a whole set of classrooms you feel you can't do anything about, but you want to encourage collaboration or play or focus time. So you might also consider maybe creating these small boxes of micro tools that you can take into classrooms and then be able to actually set up a different learning environment and support a whole different feeling of what it is that you're doing. So this is an example from a college for, what do you call it, nurse assistants and pedagogical assistants that we did, where they did have a lot of traditional classrooms, but we wanted to encourage them to play more and to also practice some of the things that they will do when they will be in jobs later on. And this is another example of the same thing. This is more focus, it's listening, it's sensing, it's actually more yoga-ish, to also support that in classrooms that don't have it. It could be Lego. Legos are really good for math and 3D understanding of space. Or again, little boxes with yoga mats or whatever it is that you need. You can put it into your classrooms in many cheap and simple ways. And a very cheap way also of reducing noise and being able to use more spaces in your school is to have a no shoes policy, and just use your morning slippers. And I'm hoping the slides are changing as I move on here. We can actually see for a fact that it really reduces noise when we're not using shoes in a school. And of course, the floor is so much cleaner, so you can easily lie down and use them. Another little trick from the book is to have focused light. So if you're creating a small room within a room, see if you can put up a lamp somehow, maybe just a cheap IKEA lamp as they did here. So you can create this sense of being alone or sense of a small room. And we can see that when we turn off the big light that actually has the same lux level in the whole room and shift it with different small lamps, we have a very lighting landscape. And it actually also means that the noise level is going down and you're only speaking to sort of your own little light circle and not to the whole room. So it helps more kids be in the same room at the same time, focus better, and helps the general atmosphere of the room. So, yep, just a few pictures how it can be done. These little girls, they don't go around with butterflies on their faces. It's just to not put them out there. This is in one school where they put in a small playhouse. So this is reception grade through 3rd grade, actually. It's shared learning space. Again, little things. I'm showing you very cheap, simple little solutions that can be used if you're working with young kids. Over here on your left-hand side, you have carpets that are placed actually on a wall, on a hook on the wall, and then the kids can take them down and place them wherever they want. And it's always super interesting to see what kind of places they choose as good spaces to work. It's not often, sometimes we would never choose it as adults, but it's just great to see and actually expand the whole, the spaces of the school in a way where the kids can take initiative. Also, just kids are allowed to use the building in a flexible way, lie up in the window, or you can have earmuffs just to, it's not to say a school is noisy, it's sometimes discussed, like if kids have earmuffs in schools, is it because the school is too noisy and loud? In my opinion, if you offer earmuffs, you can actually also give a kid an opportunity to say to those around him or her that I need a bit of peace and quiet now, so please don't disturb me. So you can actually create your own little room or little space that's private using these, and still at a very, very low cost. And this one, I showed it in Finland too. Really one of my favorite ones, just where this girl by herself decided to create her own little room where she could really focus. So it's again, how can you use micro tools facilitating choice, student voice, and personalization of the learning experience? So do any of you have anything like this you use in your school? Just share ideas that others might steal and pick up and take to their schools. Just share it in the chat if you have any. So I'm just gonna take you into an existing school. we work with a lot of schools, but this particular school, we had such a great collaboration with them, and really good project. They almost didn't have any money to change what they had, and this is what their classrooms looked like before. And as you can see, it's the same learning experience basically for every student. Not much floor space, not much choice, not much room to be creative for the teacher and have a more like, physical learning experience. And this is one example of what it looks like now. Basically, because we reorganized, we restructured the whole school. It's back to the families. We put some functions together and made better use of their space. So we were able to create more floor space and create these little different spaces where kids can work in many different ways. And basically the teachers and the students, they designed a lot of this themselves, and they are continuously talking about what's working for you, what's working for the class, what do we need. So they are changing it as they go. So it's very flexible, but it's always varied. It has choice. And how it's important to also talk about, you cannot just design this and then think it's gonna work. You also have to talk about how do you use it? What are you expecting of the students here? How should they behave in these settings? And in this school, they've chosen to have sometimes fixed seating. So everybody has a fixed spot where they can sit when it's fixed seating, and it's negotiated with the individual student what works for him or her. So they have that, and then they have the flexible seating, and then they have a message zone where they get everybody together in a very small space with an amphi staircase thing where they can sit on. And that's for sharing messages, for just giving brief instructions about an assignment or a project. And then the students can go out and work either in their fixed seating, if it's that what they're using, or in their flexible seating where they can sit wherever they want and where they're able to move around. So just here again, that's from the message zone, but also used once they are working and focusing and concentrating. And many different ways. You see the students here on the right hand side with blankets over them. This is basically also hygge. It feels cozy, it feels homely, they're respected as who they are, and they are able to find a good working situation where they focus, where it works for them, and they are not disturbing the rest of the group either. So these are just really cheap examples of how you can change that. And we can see actually, we've talked with the students here who were part of the school before the change and after the change. So I'm just going to share briefly what they're saying here. So this is a student, what a student told us. So before the change, when she went to first grade, not much to tell about her learning space. It was like pretty simple, same thing. She found it teacher-led and tough and boring to sit in the same seat all day. And once she got up, she was disturbing. So you cannot just get up from your fixed seat in that setting. It was tough always to have to work with the same friend next to you. Did feel you have influence. So there was also a lot of interruption with students needing to go to the bathroom or sharpen pencils, all of that. And here, after they changed it, this is then her experience. So she now experiences that she has influence, that things are varied, that she can actually make a choice herself of where to work, and she can change that. She can change her work situation and her learning situation if she needs to. If it's not working well, she can go to another place and just take a break and come back, and it's not disturbing anybody. So it's more supportive of the individual student's needs and also of collaboration. So what we can see and what we experience that we'd love some research into is that it seems that we can actually include a lot more students in those when we redesign spaces to cater for more different needs here. So we can support more teachers in our students in our schools. We can support their specific, their feelings, their good ways of learning and working. And it's something that we see a lot of schools beginning to move towards. So that was taking you through that design process that you can go through, those different levels of design, and also just really stressing that get nature inside as well and take kids outside, use natural light, make sure you have good air quality, there's a nice temperature, and bring nature in, and then make room for choice, personalization, and sense of belonging for children. And lastly, we don't want to forget the teachers. So this is an example from a teacher, a staff room at one of our Danish schools. So if you want to communicate to them also to be creative, be themselves, and be who they are, be their best, and have a relaxed feeling about being in school to be able to perform well, then you also want to look at your learning spaces for teachers. I just want to show you, yeah, please. So now we are rounding up actually in a minute or two. I've been talking a lot, but I guess that's how webinars go. So one little thing that you might want to change in your school, what would that be? You can share it in the chat as I share. And also if you have questions, share it in the chat while I show you this little video, if it works. And this is it's from a combined library breakout area afternoon club as well, that we created this table with little nooks underneath. All right, folks, that was basically what I had on the agenda today. So if there's anything you want to share, any ideas you want to share with some other in the group that we can help each other create better learning environments for us students, please do so in the chat. I'll leave it open for a minute or two, and also if you have any questions, feel free to either reach out to me on email. It's lena@ortens.dk, or type up your question here, and I'll see if I can maybe answer or get back. And otherwise, thank you so much for being part of this today, and have a great day, and have a wonderful, wonderful Easter wherever you are. And do share. If you decide to go out and change anything, do share with me. I'd love to see it. I'm always curious as to what you're doing in your different schools. So thank you very much. It's great to, I didn't see you, but to have you here. So really have a really great day. Thanks. Bye.